What's going on, everyone? My name is Everett Lorman. Welcome to the Volleyball Source podcast. It is Tuesday, June 1st. It's a brand new month, and we have a very special guest here. He is the head coach of the Alberta Golden Bears men's volleyball team. I will never mess up that name ever. He is also an assistant coach of the youth national team program, a former national team stud himself, former professional volleyball player. The list goes on and on. Mr. Brock Davidiuk. Brock, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Everett. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's, you know what? I was just kind of going through some things and some old pictures and through your old Volleybox profile. You know what I miss is your long hair. Have you ever thought about bringing that back?
Yeah, I miss it too. I feel that that's how I feel is a long hair guy, but I think I'm living on borrowed time with what I got going on here. Like, baldness runs in my family. I'm not sure why I still have hair. So when it is longer, that added weight, exposes that a lot more. So being 6'4", call myself 6'4", though I'm probably 6'3", I get away with hiding that up here, except around volleyball players, because then they can see it.
Fair enough. I definitely missed the long hair. There was nothing like you going for the jump set with the long hair flowing behind you, dishing that butter. Those were some good times. How are you?
Flow. I like what you got,
dude. It's long. I've had it trimmed once since the beginning of quarantine. But my girlfriend likes the long hair, and I'm like you. Baldness runs in my family. Because it's usually your mom's dad. That's how you're supposed to figure it out. And so he was bald when my grandfather was bald when he was like 25. So I feel like I'm the same as you, kind of running on borrowed time. So I'm just kind of running with it, and you know what? It's not that bad. It's feeling good.
That's good.
Thank you. Now, first of all, how are you doing? Obviously, this past year was a bit of a different year, but how are you overall?
I'm doing great. I don't think I have a lot to complain about, because I think I'm very, very lucky for a lot of reasons. But the main ones, my family, like both my, the biggest thing is our health, my family's health. And then both my wife and I didn't get furloughed or let go. We were very fortunate to be employed by incredible organizations. And because of the pandemic, and when we chose to keep our now 3-year-old, she was 2 most of the pandemic, we kept her home at certain times and had to keep her home at other times rather than send her to daycare. I got to spend a lot more time with my daughter than maybe in a normal year, where I'm away evenings and weekends more, where that didn't happen this year. And then it's weird to say, but I'm really proud of our season with Golden Bears. And I mean, I had a blast. If we didn't have the season, for me personally, if I couldn't go to the gym, it would have been a lot more boring, a lot harder mentally. But the group of guys we had this year and how committed they were to everything, it was a big success of a season, I think. And there was a lot of times where we couldn't train, but it was really inspiring and motivating. I'm really lucky to have that, to have part of my life every day. So I'm doing well. How are you doing, Everett? How have you found everything?
I'm pretty well as well. My girlfriend and I just finished moving to a new place. So that's why you might see some boxes and stuff behind me, because I still haven't set things up. But we're no longer in a 1-bedroom shoebox, which is very nice. We've got some more space, and our second bedroom is now it's our de facto office, but like we both know that it's essentially my office, because my girlfriend is a dancer, so she when she's on tour and stuff like that, she doesn't really need an office all that much. So yeah, no, things are pretty good. Things are about to open up here in Toronto. I'm hoping, and I mean, there's been 8 straight days now of Canadian volleyball to watch. Including all of the beach stuff going on. There's sitting team going on. So there's a lot of things going on right now, and I'm hyped about it. Our women's team just picked up their first win at VNL against China, beating the number 2 team in the world, which is a massive success for them. So yeah, absolutely doing pretty well. I'm pretty stoked that I get the chance to talk to you now.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, man.
Yeah, well, let's kind of like jump into it. You mentioned let's just start with the Golden Bears, because you just talked about that. It seems like everyone I talk to, and obviously this question, the answer to this question, I feel like would have been different kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. But it seems like everyone I've talked to in the volleyball world has been very almost thankful for that time off, because it's less of a grind and you get to see life at a different pace. Why was this year, like, why do you deem this year such a success, as you just said?
Well, I think like when you say people are thankful, I think that's a perspective thing. I think like when I say that, I'm thankful for, because I'd rather be that way than be bitter the whole season. I would have rather have been playing and competing, but that wasn't an option. But the reason why it was so good was I think I guess to start with some of the tangibles and the objectives, I think we saw a lot of improvement from, young guys. You expect to see a really steep learning curve, and then you try to help them with that, because sometimes they can fall off that curve. But our young guys had a really incredible first year, and we had, especially a guy like Isaac Kassalinga, who was just selected to the junior team. He was competing for top outside in our gym some days, which he's just one example. We had some other young guys, other big name guys like Liam Espedito or Bryce Newells, or guys like that we expected to be big in our first year. And then other guys that were maybe less known, or guys that came for a tryout that had great seasons, to our, franchise type players like our Max Elgert, who had an incredible year in his improvement. He came back in just incredible physical form over the summer, over a pandemic summer. He walked in the gym, and Terry Davidiuk and I are like, whoa, what was this kid doing all summer?
And he just got named to the next gen team as well. So obviously all of that hard work paid off.
Yeah, it did. And I think that's, Max has been like that since he was a young man, just putting in that kind of grind. And I really could go through a lot of our guys for things they've done. And that's just volleyball. There's academic guys, like we had Graydon Weeb, who sat at a 3.9 all year in terms of his GPA. And that's taking like more than full course load academically. So he was taking 6 courses a term, and ended up with a 3.9 out of 4 both terms. We had Cam Kern, who I think really rocked the whole mental health Instagram thing with his check-in challenge. Created this idea, which was the impetus of it. Maybe Cam had this idea brewing before, but the impetus of it was Terry Davidiuk asking if guys wanted to do some sort of dance on TikTok, and then threw it out to the athletes. And then Cam turned that into a mental health initiative, which became a check-in challenge, which he got. I don't know if you saw it ever, but he had volleyball players doing it across Canada, overseas. I thought that was really cool. And we had a lot of success stories like that through the season. So, there's guys that really bought into the program, into the plan, into the extreme windfall of pivoting constantly. And then there's other guys that just up and do stuff like that, like that we have no, input or control over, other than Terry's TikTok recommendations, that just make it inspiring to come to the gym every day. And that's a great environment to be in during a pandemic.
Are you telling me that there's a secret Terry Davidiuk TikTok account out there where he's doing TikTok dances?
If there is, I don't know about it. I mean, Terry was, slow on the uptake with Instagram, but now he's all over it, posting clothes and training videos and a very unique combination of stuff. He might be on TikTok. I don't know. I can only handle a couple of social media accounts, so I don't have TikTok.
If there is a secret Terry Davidiuk TikTok account where he's doing, like the whoa and all of these other TikTok dances, that's definitely something that I and the people want to see. So if anyone out there knows about this, please let us know, because that would be fantastic. Do you think now University of Alberta in general was really the first school to kind of cut this season and just kind of cut their losses and like, hey, you know what, no matter what, we're not going to be, I think it was all of the winter sports were kind of cut, or was it all sports?
So last summer, in a combination of the provincial government cuts to U of A, and then, we had plans for the provincial cuts, and then they were higher, but that was okay for us to survive within well, not okay. It was,
manageable,
difficult, but Once COVID hit, and that chopped away at things like students being on campus, which chopped away at sport and rec fees, which are a pretty common mechanism to fund programs. Plus, just COVID pulled the carpet up from underneath us in terms of fundraising, because so much fundraising is done in person. So Ian saw the writing on the wall, and he, I think, wanted to be very clear and transparent. And I think that was great leadership. I think he got some flack from some places and people, which I think was maybe misplaced and short-sighted, because, you know, when it came to January, he seemed like a genius. He was like, it's not going to be a season. It's not going to be a good season. And plus we can't afford it. We're out. We're saving up we're going to regroup and save up for what's next. And now we're ready. Like, that was a tough year financially, but we have, you know, I talk about our team and making it through because of our team, but really our senior leadership at U of A has been incredible in terms of him and his office. And then our COVID manager is the other guy I'd throw a shout out to. Like, those two, the broad vision of those two offices, I guess I would call them, really helped steady our ship. Not just our ship, all the sports teams.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, I almost feel like it would be a better situation to have your season, like knowing going into the season that you weren't going to be playing, you weren't going to have a season, rather than being in the gym and hoping and waiting. And yeah, it seems, from what I hear, it seems like you guys managed that well. How has this affected recruiting? Because, you know, we haven't had a national, we haven't had an entire club season this past year. And the year before, nationals and I believe provincials were canceled. So how does that affect recruiting and bringing new people into the program?
U of A recruiting, or just like how's it affected recruiting across the country?
Well, I mean, just for yourself and for the team.
We were lucky with a couple really early commitments. We had pretty early commitments in 2 positions. So that helped. I think my perception, recruiting, sometimes we talk about it as coaches, but sometimes it's a really coveted thing, like your recruiting process. So I can only really speak to my perception, but I think that it requires creativity and, I don't know, shrewdness, the right word, industriousness. Mm-hmm. And come the pandemic, you had to really rely on your research, your network, your ability to evaluate video, and luck. If you lucked out and had some of those things in line before, or if you lucked out and had people in your backyard, during that recruiting cycle, that would be very beneficial, because it's easy for you to deal with that athlete if they're in your backyard. Now, we still couldn't meet those athletes, but it's always easier if you have backyard athletes, which we had one, because they're in your backyard, but in a pandemic, no one else can come in your backyard anymore, which normally can happen, which is the way recruiting goes. So someone like Joel Nickel, who was our local commit, no one else could offer him a recruit trip or even plan anything like that. I mean, we couldn't either, but Joel had been around in Edmonton for so long, and I think was really keen on coming to U of A. But come the grade 11 year, that's where guys start to really suss out their options and start to consider whether they want to stay somewhere or leave somewhere, those kind of things. So the big thing for me is just that creativity and industriousness piece, that I think if you're a good recruiter, then you have to really go to work on those 2 things.
Yeah, I'm sure also picking up Landon Curry from TRU, that was a while ago, but that was also a big pickup for you guys heading into, I guess, next season.
It was huge. I mean, that, I think I keep saying this, but that one was really lucky. We just the way life happens, sometimes guys aren't into volleyball anymore, and our upcoming medium-aged libero, Hunter Stewart. I don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah, I remember Hunter Stewart.
Yeah, incredible athlete. Just decided he wasn't as into volleyball anymore and wanted to focus on school and work. And that happens with athletes. With Hunter, he had the maturity and foresight to let me know early. So we were working on that together. And then, so I had to start looking at liberos, and I wasn't finding many. But, you know, I wasn't too concerned because we have Young and Sam Drybrow. We got some other guys that could be multi-position guys. And then Landon Curry texted me one day, and I don't know if you know the process here, Everett, but you have to go through like ADs coach when an athlete texts you. And I ended up calling Pat Henley, Landon's coach, and Pat was really receptive and understanding to his athlete wanting to transfer. And Pat and I have a really good relationship, and that I was happy that we could maintain that during something like that, because transfers hurt. Like when guys are transferring away from you, that's tough. It happens. But for us, at the end of the day, we really lucked out getting Landon because, you know, one of the top guys, if not the top guy in that position. And it was a position that we just happened to have a hole in. So that worked really well.
That's super lucky. I'm glad to hear that you and Pat still have a good relationship, especially how things went down with Nationals in 2019. I know he was pretty upset there after you guys got the Nationals bid over them for Laval.
Yeah, I was pretty upset too. That was we sucked in that series, and we sucked while they rocked it. They were so good. Everyone played so good. Landon played so good. Tim Daubert was unreal. But they deserved to win that series. And, you know, Pat wasn't upset with me over that. There was the whole after effect of that. And then us going, and, you know, I can understand why someone would be upset with that. On the other hand, it was very clear that was the scenario that year. Like, it was very, very clear. It was stated very early what was going to come from the VRS that year. Mm-hmm. And we ended up, you know, just having the right ranking, which allowed us to go. It wasn't a surprise that could happen. What the surprise was the formula that spat us out as the team. Now, it has to be a surprise because the VRS formula is proprietary. So it's not like we can go in there and figure it out. Even if we could, that'd be a long formula to figure out. But there's pieces where you can kind of, you know, think and evaluate it. And we were like, man, we might actually still get in. How weird would that be? And that's what ended up happening. And, you know, I could see how that would be really frustrating. But I will say peanuts in compared to the frustrations caused by the following system.
Yes, I definitely agree, because I mean I went on a bit of a rant about how there was so few teams, like how Brandon and Trinity Western were playing each other in the semifinals the following year in 2020, and one of those teams who were in the national final the year before wouldn't be going, right? Obviously, it ended up being Brandon, and I definitely had some issues with that, and even that's coming from a guy who's from Ontario and has definitely been accused of being pro-Ontario in the past. But I felt that there was, you know, there's no doubt about it. The Canada West is the strongest division for men's volleyball in the country, and for women's volleyball for that matter. And definitely would have wanted to see more representatives coming out of the Canada West. Now, you guys, the Canada West has already announced how they're going to be dealing with the, I guess, post-COVID era. You guys are going to be competing more in your region. So how do you plan to kind of prepare for this season?
The simplest way I can put it is trying to create frequency of competition that's similar to a normal season. And so I'm in the middle of doing that. I don't want to overdo it where we're booking all our weekends. But that's the simplest way I can articulate the goal, is to create more competition. So I'm in the middle of, you know, contacting people with teams within our network to create extra competition.
Is there, you know, situations there where you're contacting old alumni, bringing in some guys, because, you know, you are in Edmonton. Edmonton is one of the biggest volleyball hubs in the country. So, you know, are you going to be playing against CCAA teams, alumni teams? I guess now there's quite a few more U Sport teams in the Alberta area than there was when you played in the league, with the addition of McEwen and Mount Royal. But how creative are you going to be getting with some of these matchups? Like, are we going to see like?
I don't think as creative as trying to throw together some all-star alumni team. We do that every year, and I mean, every team had probably less than 50% of their normal training last year, or let's call it 40 to 60%. Our alumni have had way less. So maybe we're lucky enough to catch Brett Walsh on a week back, or convince Riley Barnes to come out and play. But sometimes guys are moving on from volleyball and don't want to do it. And then other times there's the guys that are getting old and want to do it, but they might not be in shape enough to handle blocking Billy Johnstone or put hands in front of Braden Friesen and survive with them. So we do like bringing out our alumni when we can. I think our alumni are incredible in the way of engagement and like the social piece, but it won't rely. And we do that like once a year with what's called the Team Canada Masters match, but the creativity piece will rely more on regional and actually more on outer regional teams, trying to create scenarios there, and newer types of inter squad activities.
Okay, fair enough.
I would explain those more. It's just that they're not not organized yet. Like right now, I'm just sending out feelers and ideas, and two, it's like not really public what we're trying to create in terms of some matchups. So I don't want to.
You don't need to give away all your secrets just yet. You guys are one of the best in the country for a reason, and if you guys were giving away all your secrets, I'm sure everyone would try to do what the Golden Bears do, right? I mean, I remember years ago listening to an interview with or listening to a seminar with Benjo, and he was going through and being like, look, Alberta's the best team in our league, and we do everything to try to beat Alberta, because in our view, if you can beat Alberta, then you can beat everyone else. So I'm sure that a lot of teams would like to know how you guys manage your team and have been so good for so long.
Well, I think it's more just I don't have the details finalized yet, 'cause this would be a great platform to talk about some of those ideas, but I don't want to
all right, well,
say them and then they don't end up happening.
Come September.
But there's some fun stuff that we're trying to arrange that I think could make for a quite exciting season. So hopefully you'll hear about those and get excited.
Come September, we'll have you back on the show. We can discuss a few of those things and prep us for the season. Now, do we know if there's going to be a U Sport National Championships? Like, are we going to go back to semi-normal next year for the season, kind of on a national scale?
I think so. There's been, I'm quite adamant. So Canada West schedule, I've seen the Canada West schedule. I don't think it's been released. Have you seen it, Everett?
No, I haven't seen the schedule. I've just seen kind of how they want to operate.
Yeah. So, but that U Sports Nationals is going to be at Manitoba.
It's going back to Manitoba?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. So does that mean next year will be at Brandon?
Now you're testing me. I can't remember, but that stuff is public. That's on the U Sports site. So U Sports National Championship is planned to go ahead. It's a little later. So the changes that are being made at the regional levels are to account for COVID-19 transmission and budgets that have been hit because of the pandemic or for whatever reasons, to create a temporary structure, and then we'll return back to status quo seasons in 2022-23. It's not going to be a normal season next year with conferences going provincial or regional, but there's the changes that have been made are reduced schedule, so there's not as much schedule, a later start time, and then working in just buffering and just in case breaks and such like that, just to account for randomness that can crop up because of COVID-19. So it's not going to be as awesome of a Canada West season, but I think after this year, guys are are going to be really excited to play any type of like formal competition. And once we get to the back half, playoffs, everything that is being scheduled and built is to allow for normal merit-based playoffs. Well, in the Canada West, that I can speak to, normal merit-based playoffs, and then a U Sports National. So that end of the season, I think, is going to look quite normal, and in true, Canadian volleyball fashion, the structure is going to once again change,
of course,
like it does every year. Well, the Canada West doesn't change as frequent, but of course, the U Sports structure does in terms of who's getting there and things like that. So, I mean, it's just another year of trying to figure that one out.
I mean, it's a top-down thing from volleyball because it seems every year we've got – I don't think there's another sport in the world that gets together every year and is like, all right, guys, what rules are we going to change this year? Now are we going to allow net touches? Are we not going to allow net touches? Oh, no, we're going to allow them again. No, we're going to take them away. Or, hey, let's just switch up. World League doesn't work. Let's just switch it up to VNL and everything, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I feel like it's a top-down thing that, we can never just agree on one way to do things, and that affects the rest of us.
Yeah, now we'll have this new element of rule changes because of COVID, and you see that already on VNL with no side switches, no ball, kids, mask wearing, but everyone's quite used to wearing masks by now, and I imagine we'll have similar rule adjustments, but for a different reason this time. It's not just about fitting us into a time slot. It's about COVID-19 transmission safety.
Do you think we'll be wearing masks in match, or just more so on the benches and stuff?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm curious as to whether that would be related to vaccines. Of course, anyone can wear a mask if it's their personal choice. Like, Mauricio was wearing one.
Yep.
During the match against Canada. I imagine that was just personal choice. A mask mandate, I don't know, because you think about like vaccine uptake, where it'll be at. Will it be needed? Will it be that extra set of precautions? Maybe. I can say that I don't think it's a big deal to train in masks. I was someone that was vehement against it to begin with, but because we were mandated by our athletics office and our athletic director, and again, like, I'll toot his horn a lot because I'm a big fan. But the next day, I was like, okay. It makes sense, and we did it, and it was fine on the guys. Now, of course, they're going to not want to wear masks, but for us, it was not a big deal to wear masks while we played and trained.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how everything starts getting back to normal once vaccination starts coming through and once everyone starts having their second dose. I mean, I would imagine by the beginning of 2022 that the majority of people who will need to, will be wanting to get vaccinated and need to get vaccinated will have done so. So it's interesting to see how quickly we're gonna, move back to normal. And then, also there's always that question mark, like, how long does the vaccine last? Like, is this going to be a yearly thing, like with the flu shot? But I mean, that's not a conversation for this forum. We're here to talk about volleyball, not the pandemic.
Yeah, vaccine conversations and COVID-19 conversations can really go a long way, because I'm really interested in all those things you said. But yeah, I think if you want to leave it on volleyball, we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I don't know much about the vaccine. I don't know much about COVID-19 in general. I'm not a scientist. I don't know these things. I know about volleyball and other fun things like that. Now, I mentioned to before, I do have a question for you. In the past few years, we've seen an influx of different schools joining the Canada West. And now when you played kind of in the 2000s, all of those schools were in the CCAA. They were colleges, MRU. Was it just MRU and MacEwan on the Alberta side of things?
That weren't in the league?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
So now, how do you think that affects the league play? Because I've seen I've seen kind of two different stories. Some say that it's a great thing, we're bringing more schools in, and other people have said that it's kind of diluting the talent field a little bit. Back when you played, it was a very a normal thing, especially for Alberta guys. You guys had that pipeline. You're going to go dominate for a few years at Red Deer College. You're going to win a few CCAA national championships there with the Kings, and then you're going to come play for U of A. How do you think that's affected U Sports and Canada West volleyball in general?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opinions in answering that question. I think back then, those days, Red Deer was in their glory of powerhouse. Like that was a very strong Red Deer era.
8 in a row.
But if it weren't Red Deer, there were other really strong college teams feeding in Alberta too, like Mount Royal, MacEwan, because MacEwan was a really good college team right before they came into the league. And there's other ones that are still strong. So like SAIT, you talk about Red Deer, like Red Deer played SAIT in the national final several times. Nate, Kings, when I played Med Hat was really good. I mean, Grand Prairie has had, if you look at the span of time, Grand Prairie has had some very strong college teams. So what Red Deer was, we had that kind of farm team thing. And sometimes it was not even a farm team; it was a team that was real close. But there are other teams that were Alberta feeders as well. How it's changed, I think that the top high school players no longer go college. It has to be a very, very specific scenario, or they have to be late bloomers. So maybe, super gangly 6'8", 6'9" middles, which we need more of in this country. Maybe they go college and work up from there and get used to the speed of the game before stepping up to like a top Canada West team. Where if they go straight to Canada West, maybe, if the timing's right, maybe they get a good amount of break-in and everything, but if the timing's wrong, maybe it doesn't work out for them. So all the top blue chip high school athletes are now going straight to university. More like back when I played, you had to be, one, crazy good, and two, crazy lucky with your timing. So I'm talking, volleyball fan yourself, I'm sure you remember like a Leo Carroll.
Yep.
So he went first year. Sorry, I should say to start. It wasn't just lucky you didn't have to be a rock star or lucky to get on a university team, but to have an impact early, you had to be phenomenally good back then to play on, to start early on any university team. Now those guys that are like that now will do that early, but there's so many more university teams that I think there's more access to playing in the Canada West because there's more university teams. And that creates more volleyball being played in our country in the Canada West, because now there's all these university teams, there's all these college teams. So I think part of the mandate of the conferences, whether it be university or college in the West, is access and participation. The flip side to that is I think that from a high performance standpoint, that doesn't necessarily get us to where we want to be in terms of development, because only the upper echelon are going to develop anyways towards national team and international potential. So one could argue that like having a model where there's less teams and more strong teams, that's going to develop even better out of the Canada West. But there's teams that come into the league weak, and then they have really good structure. They have a coach who knows what he's doing volleyball wise and recruiting wise, and that can really grow to a powerful team. It's been a long time since they entered the league, but a really good example of that is Mount Royal.
It's funny that you mentioned kind of how the development side for, professionally and internationally, because in the past decade, we've seen a massive growth in terms of the amount of guys, like massive growth in terms of the success of the national team. We've seen a massive growth in terms of the amount of guys who are going to play professionally. I mean, I can't keep track of how many Golden Bears have gone over the past few years and gone and played, had success internationally and professionally. Of course, Brett Walsh has been leading the men's national team recently. You just had 2 Golden Bear guys retire from the national team. George Horburn had a great year in Austria as well. One of the top blockers there. But, it seemed like back when you were an athlete and you were coming through the system that it was a lot tougher for Canadians in general to find pro contracts. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, 100%. And I have like my opinion on it. I don't know if my opinion is accurate. I mean, you're asking some really good questions that I think like I would be curious to get coaches' opinions across the country. And these are things we talk about when we get together. The things that I think, like the way I like to describe it is comparing our like third tier players to the American third tier players internationally and the contracts they're getting. So I remember when I was overseas, some of the third tier American athletes were getting contracts in places like Poland and France, and ours were not. Mm-hmm. And I'd look at those athletes like, you know, seeing them right now or seeing them when I knew them in college, those guys aren't different. He's just American, he's Canadian. And then for me, and this would be where I'd be curious what other coaches think, because maybe I'm too reductive in this, but I think YouTube and 2016 happened. And the world went, oh, Canadians are good. Let's start signing them. And of course, like you're like around that time when it's guys like, well, Gord had already been established, but who was young at that time? Schwann's incredibly physical. But like our top guys are going to get good contracts. But our third tier guys, like back when I played, they weren't getting into France and Poland. They were maybe second in Portugal or, you know, starting in Sweden. But now I think that our guys in similar scenarios are getting really good contracts, or really good compared to where the Americans used to be, because the Americans had probably a better global reputation because the information wasn't as readily available. And now I think with YouTube and everything, you know, Volleyball Source, everything that is out there for people to see, and how easy it is to see athletes anywhere in the world, coaches can do their homework rather than just, you know, taking reputation or another coach's word on it. Plus now it's like, oh, Canada's now has qualified for the Olympics again. There's that thing that maybe adds as a trusting factor, because I think kind of just a little bit before that time is when the contract scenario started to change, and a lot more Canadians were getting a lot better contracts. What do you think?
I think it's a mix of things. I think everything that you've said 100% is very valid. 2016 is 100% was definitely that change when it was just kind of like, oh, you know, we went from, you know, I still remember guys who, you know, I look at that 2012. This was kind of when you were still playing, but the 2012 CIS National Championships was really like the start. It was, you know, Rudy Verhoof was there, Jay Blankenau was there with Calgary. Like that national championship was kind of like the start of the core of guys that we have now, and kind of further from there. And you had guys kind of graduating from CIS who were all-stars going to play in Sweden to start. And, you know, back then the FTC was really to create that bridge where, like, it wasn't uncommon for the CIS Player of the Year to go to the FTC for a year for a little bit of maturation and then go play professionally. Whereas now, you know, we've seen guys who win the OUA Player of the Year or OUA East Player of the Year go get contracts in Italy, which is obviously absolutely incredible. But, you know, I'm interested to think, like, personally for you, right? Because you were on the national team radar. You had caps for the national team. You had a decent professional career. But do you think if you were playing now that would have been a longer, maybe more successful career?
That's a tough question.
Because it just seemed back then, like you said, like the options for Canadian volleyball players were so little. I remember back, it was like 2011. Yeah, 2011. And we had like 12 guys playing professionally overseas. And that was it for Canada. And you know what? At one point, we reached a peak of over 100. It's come back down a little bit since COVID. I think there was only 70 some. But still, the fact that there's 70 plus Canadian males, and that's just not including the women. The women were 50 plus playing professionally overseas is incredible to me.
So I guess the way I would answer that is what I was saying before gets athletes their first year. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Our entry level has now changed, in my opinion. After you're over there, it's all the same as when I played, because that's the same access as they had before, or at least the same trust. So like for me in my scenario, I had a good first contract because I had a good reputation. I'd been starting on developmental national teams. I was part of the A team early on. I was part of the first FTC, which had two not CIS players the year. Mark Dodds and Nicholas Cundy were both there. Dallas Sunias, who was a phenomenal international player. Louis Pierre Manville.
Was
We had
Alex Gomo Casillas
Alex Gomo Cassius, Chris Wolfenden. We had a bunch of left sides in Libero, so I won Dallas. So I didn't really get used to setting middle, but Glenn really wanted to. That was the first year of the FTC being revitalized. So it was our 7 guys that trained there all year in Winnipeg, and it hadn't existed since the early '90s, back like when guys like Kent Reeves did it. And Glenn was trying to help us get contracts. He thought buying into the FTC would help us with our skills and our strength, which it did. Like our first year pro was easy for all of us. Like we were so strong because of that FTC model back then. But I think we were guys that had a good reputation. We had a really good resume. Like those were all guys that were either playing at world championships or the FISHU games, which back then was quite strong. So we had a lot of exposure. So like the teams I got placed on early, I think were good entry to pro. My success later, I think had I played longer, maybe things started to wane with me with the national team. And if you go down with the national team, then that can affect your ability to get a pro contract, especially if you're dropping down back then. And my last year pro wasn't very strong, but I had some personal stuff come up, like my back. I injured my back. My mom got breast cancer. And so I went home to be with her, and she's fully recovered and great now.
That's great to hear.
And that was the inflection point for my coaching career, because I had thought about continuing to play. Glenn was trying to help me get a contract in Turkey, which didn't work out. And I was not really feeling like playing anymore, because I knew that, like, for me, things were declining with the national team. Guys were surpassing me. And I wasn't enjoying pro enough to grit that out. So I'd thought about it, and that maybe I could have had an upswing, because that happens. There's guys on the national team now that have had valleys, and then they peak, or not peak. They just go on the upswing, and that's, a performer, a gritty kind of thing to do. For me, the decision to go back to be with my mom, I think was a really big inflection point, because when I was back here, I asked Terry if I could come out and help with the setters once a week with Golden Bears. And that reignited volleyball for me. And I went back to the FTC the next year, but then decided to hang it up. And then Terry approached me with a succession plan. So being back that year when my mom was going through breast cancer was kind of the, I'll say it again, the inflection point, because I hadn't thought about coaching before that. And then Terry liked what I was doing with the setters and the team and the presence I had with the team. And so he said, hey, why don't we look at this? This is how it could work for you if you wanted to be the next coach.
So is that kind of the beginning of like the Masters of Coaching program within U of A, or was that something that was already established there?
No, it was already established. Like Brad Pobolowski went through it before. I'm blanking right now. I think some other people did that I can't think of, but that was near the start. Yep.
Because that was definitely going to be one of my questions, is that you've been with the program for so long now, and you've progressed with the program, and I was always kind of wondering, like, was that always a goal of yours to kind of go back and become a coach, or did it come together naturally? And it sounds like it kind of came together a little serendipitously.
It was absolutely serendipity. I never planned to coach. I had been coaching. Like I started coaching teenage girls, like skills. Dallas Sunias, I was working out with Aaron Shula one day, and Dallas Sunias said, hey, you guys should coach in the summer, coach skills. And I was like, oh, that's not a bad idea. We just got to find gym time and stuff like that and gear. And then the Fog Volleyball, like the G and Fog, George Tokarski.
Friends of George, right?
George, yeah. Got on as a sponsor and said, hey, if you do this with Fog Name. I'll give you, help you out with stuff. And then Shula and I went to work on it. You know Aaron Shula, I assume.
Red Deer.
Yeah. And we just made a bunch of cash, like a bunch of cash. And I was like, whoa, this could be, there you go. Coaching was my side hustle back when I used to play. Sincere. Were we recording then? Yeah.
We weren't recording. That was just us kind of, chatting before the show, but absolutely. That's great. Was there anything that you were looking else to do, or were you kind of just going to figure it out?
I wanted to move. Like, I'm a music fan and a big music guy. Like, I played music longer than I've played volleyball. And when I was waffling between what to do next, after I was done with the national team, I was going to move to Nova Scotia to play music.
Wow. Why Nova Scotia?
Because Davin St. Pierre was there.
Davin St. Pierre, okay.
Davin St. Pierre is from New Brunswick, so I'm not missing that. He was doing his master's at Dalhousie. So Davin and I are very, very close, and we had been playing music for a long time before that. And so I said, hey, we've been talking about trying to do it for a year, seriously. Like, we'd been talking about doing it. We're like, hey, let's put a year into it. Let's do it. Let's create some tours, not tours, but let's see if we can bum around playing like pubs and bars and stuff like that. And I was like, hey man, I got nothing to do. Like, I'll move out there and I'd be happy to try to do that with you. And he, in an honest and mature way, said, I can't devote the time to it because I'm doing my master's. And I was like, okay, fair enough. And then things came up with my mom, and I said, well, that kind of does it for me. I'll move back to Edmonton because this is where I need to be right now. So other than that, no, I had nothing. Like, I was working at David's Tea, which I really enjoyed. David's Tea is a sweet place to work because
really, I could not picture you working at David's Tea, especially back then with that. Well, maybe that back then with the long hair, it fits the bill a little bit more. But wow, David's Tea, I would not have imagined that.
When's the last time you've been in a David's Tea? I know they're a lot less popular now, but
I mean, I haven't been in a store for God knows how long, right? I'm drinking tea right now. I've got some ginger turmeric up here, but yeah, it's been a while since I've been to a David's Tea.
Man, like, people that go on David's Tea love to be at David's Tea. Like, it's the joke that we had. Like, we were down the hall from Lululemon over Christmas, and Lululemon was intense. Like, the people that are going in there want their stuff. They want it fast. They've been standing in line forever. But in David's Tea during Christmas, it's like everyone's just looking around bright-eyed and like, oh, can I try that tea? Can I try that tea? Anyways, it was a fun place to work. I wanted to do stuff that had nothing to do with volleyball because at that time I was burnt out from volleyball. I had a bad pro year, and our team culture was really bad on that team.
Was that Saven?
I don't want to say the name of the club because it just didn't. It wasn't a great year for us. And in a more athletic scenario, I would be bitter about that because I would want to have a rebound. But I'm not at all. I have no regrets from hanging it up because I did it to be with my mom. And then this opportunity came along, and for anyone that pays attention to coach hiring in Canada, you have to be extremely lucky and have incredible timing to get a coaching job. And it presented itself to me. I didn't take the offer right away. Like, Terry brought it up, and then I had a trip planned with my now wife, who was a really good volleyball player. I don't know how deep your knowledge is, but Holly Harper, do you know?
The name's familiar, yeah.
She played with Julie Young and Joanna Nuchevska back in the day at UFC.
Yeah, at Calgary. Okay.
And Natalie Schwartz. Natalie Schwartz was a setter at that time.
All right.
Anyways, we went on a trip overseas, and I thought about it for a good couple months, and then came back and decided to start my master's, and that's when I kind of joined as a staff member, and I've been on ever since.
So, first of all, what year was that?
2012.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But back to the music thing. First of all, like, what are you a guitar guy? I could see you as a guitar guy. Okay.
I am a guitar guy. Yeah.
I feel like I knew that, whether it was from seeing a picture or something like. So and then what type of music were you guys going to be going? Are you guys going to be going down like the rock road? You guys going to be going down like the indie folk road? Or do you think you would have ever gotten to the electronic music? The EDM that's popular with the kids today?
I like all that stuff that you said. I grew up as like a rock playing guitar player,
Mm-hmm.
or like not good enough to play metal guitar player.
Yeah.
Speaking of guitar players and volleyball guys and like current guys, like Matthias Elser, you ever seen that guy play guitar?
No,
Very,
I didn't know Elser could play guitar. Is there anything he can't do?
I don't know, man. Not in my experience. I coached him at Canada Games, double underager on the Canada Games team, and Matthias and I would talk guitars or sit and he'd play guitar and I'd listen. But he plays some pretty cool stuff. Yeah, pretty. I like all those types of music you said. Obviously, guitar doesn't have a ton of place in EDM. That's more Dallas Unis's route. Well, maybe not EDM, but there's been on Team Canada, there's been some amazing musicians. Like, have you seen Dallas do anything musically?
No, I haven't seen Dallas do anything musically. I know he can dance.
Yeah, well, he's a really good DJ. He DJ'd our wedding. He's a drummer and a really good drummer.
Okay.
Brett Walsh. I mean, if you go on Brett Walsh's Instagram account, you can see him playing piano and singing.
I did know about Brett because I mean his dad is I've listened to I know his dad is still doing musical stuff in and around Edmonton. His dad Rod Walsh, who was a member of the 1984 Olympic team or was with that group. So yeah, that's sick. I've always kind of thought like maybe we should get together like a Team Canada. I don't know, like just jam sesh or something. You know, get the guys together and you know just play some music.
So we had one in back when in the Winnipeg days. We called it Duraco's Pain.
Duraco's Pain.
Because we had
that when Stelio was coaching the team.
Yeah. Do you know Chris Wolfenden?
Yeah, Chris Wolfenden.
Really good guitar player, good singer.
Okay.
So it was me, him, Christian Barta. Do you remember Christian Barta?
Oh, I don't know that name. No.
Dallas was on drums, and then our bass player was our athletic therapist. But one of the guy that a lot of people don't know, and he's incredible at guitar, especially with the massive hands that he has, is Paul Durden.
Durden can play guitar.
Durden can play guitar really well.
All right. Well, I'll have to ask him about that next time. If ever you guys want to do this and you guys need a bass player, maybe a singer, I'll jump in and I can help out there.
Okay.
I can help out there too. I play a little piano and some guitar as well, but I mean, I've seen what some of the other guys can do. And yeah, no, I'm more of a background guy for that kind of stuff, but that would be sweet. Kind of going back to the Winnipeg days. What was it like back in Winnipeg? Because it seems like Winnipeg was such a different Canadian volleyball world. Like it was when the program had very little money, was struggling to find success. And, you know, what was it like? And also another thing too, is that the women and men were together, right, in the same place. So it seems like it was a bit of a different world than what we see now with, you know, the training centers in Gatineau and Richmond.
Yeah. So some of the like bare bones stuff there, like we didn't really have a home gym. Mm-hmm. So we trained out of the IGAC when we were lucky, and then a place called Lipset Hall when we weren't, which is where we trained out of for FTC. And that was, like you said, kind of a funding thing. We didn't really have a team room. I don't know if you've been in a team room at Gatineau, but it's a pretty special spot. We didn't have that in Winnipeg. We would use the Bison's team room when we could. Now, that being said, the structure and the people, like I went there when Stelio was the coach, and then Glenn came in after Stelio, and the other people, you know, like, you know, Frank Boyer, who just recently.
Frank Boyer, legend. Not enough credit goes to Frank Boyer for sure.
Yeah, and the people that came before him, yeah, I don't know if you remember them, like Emily Archambault.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then Carla Steiner was the Winnipeg version. And that position, whoever's hiring that position is doing an incredible job. Same with, well, I don't know what it's like now. I assume it's incredible as well, but athletic therapy was just amazing. Like our athletic therapist then, and when we moved to Gatineau, the staff members were just awesome people and guys that we really got along with. And that was the case in Winnipeg. Like those kind of people just made it awesome. Like Carla Steiner, she's now Carla Wolfenden, I was really close with Carla. We almost called the band Steiner's Ache, but we called it Duraco's.
Steiner's
and you're really entertaining me here with these Glory Day stuff. But the thing for me, like, I was happy as, swear word, to be there, because I grew up watching these guys play in that gym. I grew up watching Murray Grappentine and Paul Durden, Scott Koski, all these guys. And then I got to go and be there and train with them. And so I remember, like, when I got on the plane to go there, just being like ecstatic. So arriving in Winnipeg, getting my own apartment in Winnipeg, where the national team was training, I have nothing but just the fondest memories of being there. Plus, I was there we had a really good group of guys. All those older guys, like especially Murray Grappentine and Chris Wolfenden, really took me under their wing, and those are relationships that I still cherish. So I have a lot of really good memories of Winnipeg. And like you said, it used to be more commonplace, but I don't know if it will be again. Training in the same city as the women's team created a really special bond with the girls team, or the women's team, I should say, because we were really good friends with them. We would, do social events, we'd have parties together, and, lo and behold, there's people like Leo Carroll and Emily Cardonia that are now married. And that's Mark Dodds and Shelley Chalmers, like that. Those kind of relationships formed there, or at least started there.
Just building the next future of volleyball stars, eh?
They're already on my recruiting list, so
yeah.
Those.
I mean, I definitely agree, because you're mentioning Grappentine and Wolfenden and guys like Durden and stuff like that. Like, that was just when I was getting into volleyball. I remember watching at the Anton Ferlani Cup in Ottawa, and that was 2005 or 2006, and that was literally like, that was my first, like, my mom had seen Grappentine and Brinkman on a flight home from Germany, and they were on the promo for that event. She was like, let's go see this. And I had played like 1 year of high school or middle school volleyball, and literally, like, I saw those games. The B team played Argentina, and then the A team played Tunisia on the Friday night, and I ran into someone there, and the next morning was my first club tryout, and that was kind of how I got into the sport, and like legitimately, like, never looked back after that. So you bringing up all of these legends from like the Winnipeg days, like, those are the guys that got me in. Actually, somewhere around here, I'm not entirely sure, I have a signed Steve Brinkman and Scott Koski jersey from the 2006 World Championships. So I love hearing about these kind of these golden days, because as much as, like, that was in a lot of ways kind of a low point from the program, it was where everything got rebuilt, and it was the base of which, got rebuilt. Even going down, like, guys like, Dustin Schneider and guys like yourself, who really built up the beginning of what is Team Canada men's volleyball today in from Winnipeg, and then in Gatineau. Like, that's the beginning of what is the Maple Volleys now, and it's a big part of the reason why, we are as ranked as high as we are now.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. You're giving me probably more props than I deserve. But it was, I'm just feel so lucky to have been involved. You mentioned seeing, your first volleyball memories. Mine was my dad took me to the gym to watch Doug Bruce set. Well, he didn't know. My dad didn't take me knowing who Doug Bruce was. My dad's a curler. But he knew I was getting into volleyball, and I saw Doug Bruce set, who later, he had an unfortunate thumb injury that ended his career, but he was, at that time, I think, one of the best that we've had, and it would have been nice to see him play longer. But that was it for me. Like, when I saw him play, I was just, anyone I saw at that age that was good like him, I was immediately tried to be like them. Whether it was Doug Bruce, Jeremy Wilcox, Kent Greaves, Scott Koski, just watching Nikola Grbic, massive Nikola Grbic fan, to go outside of the country. But yeah, back then, the other thing, Everett, is we weren't living in the YouTube era, right? So like, when we got to see that kind of stuff, we just, you tried to take a snapshot or memorize it, or like keep that VHS tape somewhere where it wasn't going to get melted to the wall or something like that. And I had a lot of those tapes at at home.
Oh, I bet. I would love to take a look at those. I do remember the first time I got to watch you play, though. It was the Pan Am Cup in 2011. We were playing in Gatineau at the Bob there, the rink, and there was no air conditioning. It was hot as F the entire time. We were sweating, and you hated the shoes that the national team had given you, and you had a discussion with me about, you were like, do you think that we could unstitch an ASICS shoe and we could put the bottom of the ASICS shoe onto this other shoe that we're using and stitch them together, because I hate using them. And I still remember that conversation with you, and I thought it was hilarious.
Well, yeah, during that tournament, I don't know if it was my, complaining and whining or just or trying to not wear them. But Glenn called me, and Glenn never called me. Like, just coaches wouldn't call. And he's like, listen, I know that you're wearing ASICS. You got to wear Mizunos. And I was like, they're just really uncomfortable. And he's like, yeah, well, I'm not going to play you if you don't wear them. I was like, okay, got it. I'll wear them.
I do remember you. I'm pretty sure the first game was against the Dominican Republic. And it was a random time. They played the game at like 1 p.m. in the afternoon on a weekday, and school was still in session, and there was maybe 200 people in the crowd. And that was my first event for Volleyball Canada, and I was kind of being like, oh, okay, this is what international volleyball is. All right, this is interesting. And you were wearing ASICS, and I do remember that there's repercussions from that. Then I think that's funny. And I mean, now you're a Golden Bear, and you guys in ASICS are pretty much synonymous for shoe game.
Well, I feel like the shoe game, I don't know if it was Fred that changed everything, but it's now like a lot different. Like, it's a lot more shoe culture. Like, guys got some pretty nice shoes. Like, when I played, or at least my approach was just super utilitarian, but now I think there's a lot more desire for like the look of the shoe. And I mean, I'm not against that. It's just the way that the culture shifted. But you look at, no one's wearing Mizunos out there during VNL on our team.
No, very, very few. I still remember talking to a few Volleyball Canada people about it, and they were trying to play it off like, oh, no, we've always let them wear what they wanted. And I was like, no, I definitely remember Brock talking about stitching a Mizuno shoe over an ASICS shoe. And
I think I was wrong back then. Like, I should have been doing what, that was a big part of our sponsorship. And you talk about building things in Glenn's, vision, really, really big and broad vision of building things. And I am confident that there's a billion things he's doing that none of us know about behind the scenes, and all the stuff he's had to go through to create the scenario that allows the team to flourish. And a lot of that is, of course, centered around funding. So back then that would have been a piece of it. And it's something that I should have bought into more. But I think it is, a place, there's a place in the sport now where when I played, shoe sponsorship was a really big thing. Like, we had, we don't have, like, ASICS being our team shoe isn't a thing anymore. It was when I played, and we would have shoe budget. And when I played all my Team Canada years, it was all like, when I started, we were ASICS, and we had to wear ASICS. They were amazing shoes. When we switched to Mizuno, at the start, they weren't good. The shoes weren't good. But Mizuno, like, took the feedback. And right when I was ending, I remember the shoes could start to get a lot better. But you take a look at where it is now, and I mean, I don't know the sponsorship deals that some athletes or some teams have, but I can just see on the weekend how it's, a lot of our guys aren't wearing their sponsor's brand unless it's an individual sponsor in some scenario that I don't know about.
Yeah, I definitely remember, because I mean, growing up for myself, it was the same thing where, guys wore running shoes and guys wore ASICS or Mizunos, and that was it. But then, as I still remember, I think it was about 2012, that's when basketball shoes started coming in. And then now you've got Nike and Adidas, like, specific volleyball shoes that look good. And, it's all about that look good, feel good, play good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, when you mentioned like that, there was definitely a trend of type of shoe. So, like, teams that I played on, it went through either volleyball shoe or running shoe. Those were the big trends. I wore basketball shoes when I started playing, these super old school Kobe's, and then these gross black and orange shoes that I got the nickname Spaceman for. And then I stopped wearing those. I just like the feel of them. I like the higher ankle. But a lot of us were wearing running shoes and volleyball shoes. And I found that, like, for me, like, the shoe I liked the most was just like a pure volleyball shoe, like a mid-cut shoe. And now I'd say, like, I mean, I'm not a big shoe nut, so I could totally misspeak and not know what I'm talking about, which is probably the case, but it seems to me like there's a lot more basketball shoes now.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. I mean, I think volleyball's gotten a little more swaggy, if you will. You know, there's a little bit, the guys and girls who are coming in have a little bit more confidence, and they like to show that in the court. And hey, I have no problem with that. You know,
I think there's place in sport for that. Like, I don't think we need to just be these uniform automatons. Like, I think it's important that athletes have like a signature style, and I also think it's really important that they buy into a vision of a team. But I think there's room in there for personality and signature, and you know, I think you see that on our national team, but I think you also see, you know, I think our game against Argentina really showcased how much better of a unit our team is than Argentina's was, like, court presence wise. While Conte was off on his own, Team Canada was just rolling with their unit and wouldn't let go. And you got to find a good balance between the two. But I think there is room for swagger, and I believe that when I was a player and as I'm a coach.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I mean, I definitely think I think that unity that Team Canada has now, on the men's side, I think we're starting to see be created on the women's side. It's a new team, young team in a lot of ways. But on the men's side, the way that team interacts and the way that they work together as a unit, you know, the sum of its parts is greater than each individual. You know, if you take each of those guys, and maybe they're not the biggest players on their professional teams. I mean, some of those guys are putting up some pretty good numbers professionally, but the way that Team Canada works together on a whole is so cohesive, and that's what makes us, you know, so deadly at the international level. And I mean, you said it before, that definitely 100% comes from the Glenn Hoag factor and the culture that he's instilled on the team over the past, you know, 15 plus years now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that now changing gears here? I mentioned on the onset that you are an assistant coach of the youth national team. Is that something that is trying to be created now with the youth national team? Because, you know, growing up for me, there was no youth national team program. You know, now we have a youth national team, a junior national team. You got the next gen. You have all of these different groups leading up to the national team. Is that cohesiveness and that way that Team Canada, the way that Team Canada plays volleyball, is that something that you guys instill on the athletes kind of early on at those young ages of 17, 18, 19?
It's hard. I think it's hard to get that kind of culture. Like, you talk like a Blair Ban, TJ, Gord, Nick, guys that have been there for, I mean, they're going on a decade. They'll pass on the culture. They'll pass on the stories that bolster the culture. They'll pass on the lessons. We can't do that on a youth national team, or on the youth national team program, because it's an age class program. So you have a guy in a maximum scenario 3 years, but it's very rare. A lot of times it's like 1 year, 2 years, and that's not a year. That's a season, and it's usually weeks. So now, that being said, it is our job to still instill culture as coaching staff. And we had our first virtual meeting on Sunday, and our head coach, Mike Hawkins, did a really good job of laying out the bones of what that should be in terms of standards and expectations. So, which I think are quite simple team behavioral expectations, but a lot of times it's those simple things that really make a difference in a strong culture. I think it's our job to turn their heads towards the national team and say, this is what it looks like, and try and aspire to that. The more we can get a peek behind the curtain, the more powerful that lesson will be. Because just watching them on VNL, you only get the tip of the iceberg that is culture. Last year, when we were fully virtual, we got to have guys on our call like TJ, like Steve, JVD, Nick, Blair, and then staff as well, because it was all virtual. Like in a normal year, I don't think we get that. But I think that did give an eye-opening view to the culture and the passion to wear the maple leaf, which is one of the things we talked about on Sunday, which I think is important when you're young and selected to a national team at a young age, to make sure you definitely don't take that for granted.
Yeah, I definitely think that is important. I mean, I know I saw Liam Rempel, for example. He was posting. He's one of the guys who was announced to the 30 man roster, and he was posting about how honored he was to wear the maple leaf. And I definitely agree that that's something that needs to be instilled and kind of pushed at that young age. That like, hey, it's an incredible honor to wear this jersey and to be a part of this program, and you have to treat it as such. It's very interesting to me when I look at the coaching staff of this program, because you've got like guys like Mike Hawkins, yourself, Dave Preston, some of the top coaches in the country who are all during the regular season, during the fall, winter, and spring months, who are all competitors, and then in the off season in the summer, you guys come together to work together to better Canada's youth. How is that dynamic of working with some of the best coaches in the country?
Well, we haven't done much yet because we've done selections, and then just some really preliminary planning. I think that Mike organized us as a staff very well in terms of selections, because it was a really unique scenario and there was a lot of work to do. I can only speak to like our our side of Canada in terms of coach relationships. Like, I think for me, I like having professional peers, but I also really like competing, and that was really similar to how I played. So if I stepped on the court against a Mark Dodds when I played, I was there to ruin Mark Dodds as much as I could and his team, and I would do that at any cost, ethically speaking. And then off the court, I would want to know him and get to and be friends with him, and like I would value that relationship so much so. Like Dodds and I like hated each other, good court hate when we played, but we lived together off the court, like with national team. And that kind of relationship went not back and forth, continued through our careers, because he was at U of S, I was at U of A, and we would just be at each other's throats when we played, and then we would, be in each other's arms when we were off the court. And that, though it's different now, it's a lot less fiery and a lot more mature. Not mature, because you can be mature and do that, but it's a lot less fiery. I still value that type of relationship with my peers. So like if I'm going to prepare for a match, I seriously want to beat the other coach and the other team on the other side. But I really value the peer group, and I think that I'm afraid of losing that, because being a coach, it can be very lonely. And that's just the nature of the job. And so I've really valued the relationships I have with the coaches in our conference, because those are the ones I see the most and talk to the most. And, I could, like, in the last 2 weeks, I had phone calls with Ben Josephson, Sean Skye, Mike Hawkins, and that list can go on. Larry McKay reached out just the other week. And I really value that. So I think that I'm really excited to then come together this summer with Mike, who I have pretty much an ongoing dialogue and relationship all year. Dave Preston, I've only known as like coach across the country, and growing up as a player, this volleyball icon, being a guy that I actually remember thinking, I would, I always wanted to play for Keith Hansen and Terry Daniluk, but I remember thinking like, man, Dave Preston, I wonder what it'd be like to play for him. Like, I remember thinking that when I was a player. And so I'm really looking forward to coaching with him this summer, because I just think there's so much I could learn from him. Nate Gronveld and I crisscrossed a little when he was just coming up. He was dabbling in the national team, and Nate and I got along really well. That like year that I went back to FTC after my mom had breast cancer, he was at the FTC. I think that was the year we kind of shared there, and him and I got along really well, and have had, a lot of mutual respect through the years. And then Jared Brown is like
beauty,
the Manitoba legend. Like, Jared was involved with the Bisons back when I was playing for U of A. And like, I was really, really good friends with Tone Van Lankveld, if you remember him.
Oh yeah.
So I know JB from then. And then Matt Kruger, I've come to really know and like, and Matt and I get along really well just through the Canada West circle. He actually did a guest lecture for the course I teach this winter. So I think I really value those relationships. It might not look like it when I'm on the sideline, because I also really value trying to beat all those guys as best I can. And but that is something that I enjoy about the job, actually. And I hope that, get an opportunity to maybe to get closer and learn a lot from volleyball icon Dave Preston is something that I'm really looking forward to this summer, along with the rest of the staff, because it's just going to be such a fun environment after we've had such a drought of training
of everything. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at this coaching staff, like the young men who are going to be a part of this youth national team are incredibly lucky, because you have such a breadth of knowledge, from Dave Preston, who was with the national team back in the 90s and has, guys like Stephen Marr, Danny Demianenko, Jordan Pereira, who are all athletes of his, were on the VNL. And then, you've got guys like Jared Brown, who I think is, one of the guys like Jared Brown and Matt Kruger are the types of guys that keep volleyball moving forward in this country below the surface level, and no one ever knows. Like, Jared's been doing such a great job with the 204 Volleyball Club for so many years. I have a massive amount of respect for Matt Kruger and the things that he's done over the years, especially with UBC and in the program this past year. So I think that, the collection of you guys working together to better these young men is only going to benefit Team Canada volleyball in the future. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different this year because there was no tryouts, there was no process. But is there any I've got the list in front of me. First and foremost, what stands out to me is how many volleyball names. You talked about the Doddses and Leo Caro and Emily Cordornier, and they're having kids, but their kids are a little bit younger. But you've got two Greaves kids with Logan and Mason. You've got a Reeve Gingera out there. Like, you've got some old school Canadian volleyball names that are coming back into the fold. So who are some of the kids to maybe look out for? Like, maybe people should have on their radar. Maybe they're going to be seeing, on a U Sport court near them sometime soon, or maybe on a national team jersey in a few years down the road.
I don't think I can answer that question. And
I understand, but I had to ask.
I think part of that also, Everett, is I think the selections were quite good. Like I said, the way Mike organized us and structured it and position specific to us, I think it's a good representation. I think that about the junior team too. I think as you make selections, especially as you move up in national team programs, they get critiqued, and that's part of the game. And I think that one of the critique points of the current selections is that all the selections happen by video. So I'm really kind of curious. Well, not only by video. I think we all try to do our character references and research and stuff like that, and weigh all that against and leverage it against the video. There's a couple athletes where I'm like, man, this guy looks amazing on video. And I'm like, I wonder what he's going to be like live. And that's part of, we have 4 university head coaches on staff. So we've spent a year of only watching video, not having the live feel of the game, the vision of the player, hearing the player, just sensing everything that's going on at a nationals tournament. So you don't get that feel. But at the same time, you can hit rewind. So it's like, oh, did that setter actually square there? Oh, he didn't. Doesn't matter that he didn't square. What does he do on other sets? What does he do on his middle 31 sets? Rewind. And you can take a look at that, where you can't do that.
That's a good point.
In a nationals tournament, unless you're one of those savvy coaches, or I won't say his name, but guy that carries a GoPro around to record the ones he's really interested in. I'm
gonna keep, next time I'm at nationals or something, I'm gonna keep an eye out for different coaches with the GoPro. It makes sense.
It does. I think. I was like, maybe I should video some of these guys. But yeah, so that it was interesting, and I'm curious to see, to kind of check it when we get there. Were we right with this guy that we knew very little about? Were we wrong? Like, is this guy maybe a little off the mark, or is this guy that we thought was a wild card like way better? Also, we had, which is not surprising, but everyone's self-reporting physical stats. So there's physical stats that will be accurate. There's some that might be off. Not everyone has a vertec that they can tell their spike touch, but like the what's the word? Just that it's so common to collect physical stats now, and so many athletes have a breadth of physical stats that they're able to present those to us now. And they were a really important thing over this year because we only had video. We couldn't see them live. And so physical stats were something we had to really factor in based on the position profile, the player profile. But then we have to trust the testing of it unless they sent us video of their test, which some athletes did. So that will be interesting to see how they stack up physically to their numbers. Did they, overshoot? Did they say they touched higher than they did? Did they say they touched lower? I find it interesting when guys say they touched lower. That was a big, when I was in the scouting process of Billy Johnstone, he said he touched a lot lower than he actually did.
Really?
And no excuse. And he stood by it. And when we were recruiting him, we had to feel out, who is this guy? Like, what's his character like? What's his personality like? And that's a story for me where it was like, wow, he had this lower spike touch and he didn't blink at it for a second. He just said, that's my spike touch. And then when I found out that he was actually doing it on a wall, not a vertec, he was still touching like 11.6 or 11.7 on a wall. But then when he did it on an actual vertec, he's like, hey, I did it on a vertec. I'm at 11.10. I was like, wow, that's nice and high. And plus, I love how you didn't try to, because at the time he was a big recruit being marketed around and people were blowing up his spike touch number and everything. And when I asked him, he gave me a lower number. And that was, and him making no excuse for that difference, just saying, hey, no, this is what it is, spoke volumes in terms of his character, especially the way he delivered it. And then in the end, he ended up touching as high as everyone was saying. So that was an interesting piece and something that you have to factor in. And sometimes if an athlete misrepresents himself, it's just an error. Like it's set up the vertec wrong or didn't have half inches on the vertec or whatever it is,
Yeah. I definitely understand that. I remember one year there was this kid who was posting stuff on Instagram and being like, he just set a new world record. He's touched 12.10. And it was just because he was like reading the vertec wrong. He was like trying to get me post it on Instagram. And I was like, there's no way this kid from like an NCAA D3 school is out here touching like 12.10. And he wasn't like anything super tall, but I definitely see why some of the kids might want to, boost their stats a little bit.
Well, you definitely shouldn't, because if we find out that you did intentionally, then it's, definite negative points.
If it
find out you're under, then it's, worst case scenario, neutral points, usually extra points.
Yeah, you're the type of kid be like, you know what? I touch 12 feet, but I'm just gonna bring it down a little bit. I'm gonna say 11.9, just so I seem a little bit bigger and better. Now, from this roster of U19 guys, is there any guys who are going to be coming to play for you for the Golden Bears this year or in the future? Any confirmed recruits?
Julian Phillips from New Brunswick is our confirmed recruit on the youth team.
A New Brunswick guy. You guys usually don't go to New Brunswick.
Never have before.
Whoa, this is number one.
I'm athlete. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What about him like stuck out for you guys that you wanted to grab him for the Golden Bears?
Two things: his physicality, and he really wanted to play for us, and I like that. Those are two really great things. He was very passionate about coming to U of A, and in the recruiting battle, there's guys that you gotta sell and talk to and even convince. But if a guy wants a spot on our team, he's got to really want to come. Now, there's sometimes guys that aren't certain, right? And that's normal. That's part of the recruiting process. But Julian was hell-bent on coming here. And that kept him in the conversation until we could really tell that he was as physical as he is, because he had very little video. And this was I've never met Julian in person because of the pandemic. But he's he's very whippy and explosive, jumps really fast, swings really fast, and I think he's got a bright future because he's also like he's got a lot of frame to build into.
Fair
Like
enough.
I think once we get him in our strength and conditioning program, that he's going to really up all of his physicality because he just hasn't gone through that stage yet. He's also an athlete that he's one of our only guys that's been playing all year because New Brunswick has been fortunate with COVID. Now he's not playing at the level that we have here. Where, well, I shouldn't say that. Braden Friesen was playing all year with NEP, but Julian has been lucky enough to play all year in New Brunswick, and being a long, tall, raw guy, that's what we need out of him. So I think he's got a really exciting future.
Is that something that you can take, like you can look at someone's physicality and be like, hey, he has all this upside physically, and we can teach him and we can kind of fill in the gaps of his game around that?
It depends on their character. It also depends on where they are in their maturity cycle and their position. For us, we've had a couple of recruits that have this type of scenario, but one that sticks out in my mind is Isaac Kassalinga, who just made the junior national team. You know Isaac?
Yep. No, I know of him. I've never met him or seen him play.
When he came on his recruit trip, we already very highly valued him, but when he came on his recruit trip and working with him on court, you're like, wow, this kid learns fast and made changes really fast. And that even upped it even more. And then, lo and behold, he had an incredible first year because he just learns and improves so much. The capacity to change is the biggest driving factor in order to make, changes. So that's really important to try to get a feel for from an athlete. And this is the hardest year to do that because you can't see them in person.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't imagine how difficult that is. You're almost like recruiting and picking a team blindly and just being like, hopefully this guy works out.
Yeah. I mean, I think at our level and our, like what our days look like is that you should be appropriating time to that to figure that out. But at the same time, there's probably a number of recruiting scenarios where coaches are taking flyers on guys, and that might be a appropriate thing to do, or it might be like, we need this, we got to take this risk. And that's the game of recruiting. Like, I think if you're not ready to dabble in the dynamism of recruiting, then you might not be ready to build a top level team. But I will say that that's only my knowledge from doing this for only a few years. There's a lot more seasoned vets out there that have been doing it for a lot longer.
Fair enough. Speaking of seasoned vets, we talked a little bit about it earlier, but you had the privilege of learning under Terry Daniluk, who is arguably one of the greatest CIS/U Sport coaches we've seen in men's volleyball ever here in Canada. You talked about it a little bit at the beginning that he's still around and in the gym. How valuable was your time kind of learning from Terry? Because it seemed like it was quite a process of you taking the team over. Like, first you were an assistant coach, and then, you were the associate coach where you'd be standing up during the games and he was sitting down, and then you kind of took it over. But what was it like learning from, a legend like Terry, and how much is he still involved with the team now?
So you can get your master's done in a year. That would be really difficult. And you'd have to devote a lot of time to the academic side of it. You can do it in 2 years, which is like more of a normal pace. My supervisor was Ian Reed, who we talked about earlier. And he told me to do it in 3 because we were working on the succession plan. He's like, you're going to learn the most, and you should be trying to learn the most from your time with the Bears. So I don't want you to be missing practices or be missing games or be missing quality of those things. So I recommend spreading your degree out to 3 years. And that sounded good to me because I'd been out of school for 6 playing volleyball and music. So I didn't know how to do stats anymore or study. I had to relearn that all again. So that set the stage for me to really spend time learning from Terry, making notes, making spreadsheets to kind of follow his process. especially because Terry, it's all up here and in here. Like I like putting stuff down and writing stuff down. So a lot of what he does is just like his experience in his notebooks and everything. And I was trying to write that stuff down and get as much of it so I could refer back to it. And when I first started planning the seasons and planning practices, I had all that stuff to refer back to, which was incredibly useful. The time span, like the succession plan, I think is a really good way to structure a transition, especially of a big program, because this is a big program at a big school. And so I had to learn how to do all those things. And if I had to be plopped in this program without any mentor like that, I think I would struggle quite a bit. And then, the result would be the team would struggle too. And you can have a year where you struggle anyways, but to be set in a position where you kind of don't have, where your learning curve is massive without any resources is not, I think, a good idea for a coach. So I think a lot of when a new coach is hired, people are trying to build kind of, give the coach some sort of training wheels and then take them off. And I was really lucky with my scenario that way. And I still am, because I still will ask questions of Terry. And they've shifted in what I'm asking. At first it was a lot about just trying to learn how to run practices for this team, run the season. And now it's a lot more about logistics, admin, student decisions, fundraising initiatives, and trying to pick his brain on those kind of things, because we know that he's this incredible coaching icon, and we still have him in the gym doing those things because he's still so vibrant with all that. But what some people might not know is he's just a guru in terms of networking and fundraising. And that allows us to create financial scenarios for our team that maybe some other teams can't. Maybe some other teams can. I don't know the books of other teams, but having Terry do what he does, like I'd mentioned fundraising before, like Terry right now, like before I came into this interview, was doing fundraising. Like he does, I don't know. Do you follow him on like his thrift stuff that he sells?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, he's been making money these last few months for our program through that. And he really enjoys it. And like a time he's making money when people aren't making money. And so that really helps us. And having him do that is incredibly useful. It's especially right now I think it'll pay off in spades, but at the end of the day, like the biggest, I think, the incredibly valuable thing that he adds is his wisdom and knowledge. Because Terry isn't like, it's not an old dog, new trick scenario with Terry. Like Terry has always been able to adapt. And as we're in modern volleyball and, how things have changed so much in the last 5 years, Terry has kept an open mind to all those changes. And when I came back, I was like, Terry, I think this is what we should be doing. He was really receptive to my ideas. And him and I work really well together when it comes to operations of the team and coaching techniques, strategies, theories. And even though he's older, I think he's really kept himself current with those kind of things. And I think the players really respect that from him, because he can hold that up next to his experience. And I hope to keep him around as long as possible, because I think he's an absolute asset for a program. And I want to create a scenario for him like that, where he feels that he's still enjoying it and it's still good for his family as he moves towards his retirement. But you see him in the gym, it doesn't look like he wants to retire, because he's quite vibrant. He's working with the setters, like I got to work with Terry as a setter, and guys like Max and Cam, Sean Robertson, who's our player manager setter, like they get to learn from Terry, which I really want for them, because I'll work with those guys a lot, but then they get their time with Terry. And our volleyball junkies, like the setters that come and want sessions with him, and then with me, they get to learn from the old and the new, and a combination of the two. And I think that he can do that in every position. So it's really valuable to our players.
It's really interesting that you say that, even though he's an older guy, he's kept up with the times, because I really found that's why, Alberta was so dominant throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s with your few national championships in there too. But his ability to continue learning and continue evolving the game to me was something that was pretty incredible. Just watching how the look of Golden Bears volleyball changed based on the athletes that they had that you guys had around, to me was always incredible. Was that always the plan for you to kind of take over the team, or is that something that just kind of happened naturally over the course of your masters and working together?
Yeah, it was the plan. Like he approached me with it back in 2012 or 13.
Wow.
But he didn't say, here you go. He's like, these are the things you need to do and I think you should do to be ready for it, to be able to apply for it. And in short, they were get your masters and coach as much as possible. So like that's when I started coaching provincial teams, junior national teams, getting involved with youth team, select team, all that kind of stuff. And just coached for all summers until my wife got pregnant. Then I started taking summers off. So once a few years ago, became time to make the shift. And so we sat down and kind of hashed that out, how it would happen and the year it would happen. And then we made the switch and yeah.
Do you think he saw you as being a head coach and coaching before you saw yourself as a head coach and coaching?
Yeah, because he said it to me. I remember he said it to me one time when I was playing. That he could see me coaching, and I was like, "Oh, that's funny," because I don't see myself coaching because I didn't have that plan. I was a very different person when I was 21, 22 than I am now, which I'm proud of. Like I think that should be the case, but I didn't have that kind of ambition back then.
Wow. So
I had ambitions. I just didn't have that ambition.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to be on a national team for any sport and playing professionally in any sport if you don't have ambitions, right? You'll be in someone's basement playing video games. So, obviously you had ambition, but it's crazy to me how much vision he had. Because I think there, especially during the I wouldn't say the prime, because you guys are still one of the biggest threats in the country and a top 3 program in the country any given year. But in that spree when, it was almost a guarantee that Golden Bears volleyball was going to be winning nationals, it seemed like he was just so far ahead of the curve coaching wise than compared to what everyone else was doing in this country.
Well, I wouldn't be able to comment on that. Like, I think I could see the perception of that. I think, Terry got the train rolling with the program, and that really attracted big time recruits. I still think, as I get older, I get more recognition and gratitude of timing and luck. And I think that Terry would probably argue the same, there's luck and timing involved, but being on those teams, like the 3 years I was here, watching him coach and recruit and create scenarios and opportunities for us, I could see how he was able to keep that going. And then, you look, I think there's, at the same time, there are incredible coaches doing similar things, doing the same things, like Larry McKay at the time. I remember when I was playing thinking like, wow, like Larry is such a mastermind and so advanced in how he's doing things. Obviously, Ben Josephson has created this incredible era with Trinity Western where they're a very dominant force too that we're all trying to topple over, and sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. And I think that there's been ebbs and flows of that where, yeah, we've had our dominant years. Trinity's been really dominant. UBC has been really strong, and that team that won was so incredible. Brandon, I mean, you mentioned that team, like Brandon not going to nationals. Well, they didn't go to nationals because they had bad luck. They were incredibly strong that year. And like Baghdadi, Friesen, and Viles, I can't remember if all 3 of them got concussions, but 2 of them got concussions at bad times, and that's just bad luck. Now, other teams have had bad luck. Like we lost Taylor Arnett in a semifinal playing Trinity, and for our chance to three-peat, and Taylor, one of the best middles in the country, goes down. And would that have made a difference? I don't know. But bad luck and good luck are both factors. And like Brandon that year, man, they were so lethal. And I feel bad I remember thinking like, wow, look at Grant and like how composed he is through all this. And I mean, I'm just watching from the outside, but like, that must have been just really frustrating because like that team was just so deadly. And going back to like Dave Preston and all the incredible like the Eastern dynasty he's made, and now Gabe is creating this threat at Queens and other teams like Johnny B's team. When we were lined up against them, they were looking really strong. And there's so many things that need to line up. But going back to Terry, like he made a lineup for what was it, 10 years in a row that our teams were in the national final. And I don't think that was just luck. I think that was Terry being his work ethic, his care, and his ingenuity that put the program in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been astonished how gracious he's been, even with me when I'm calling the Golden Pandas.
He let you have that one though.
You know what? That's one of those that'll just kind of go down. And that was like, I still remember.
I should show you that I have this in my office.
Oh, there we go. The pandas, the pandas blanket there. And I still remember that one because I was so hyped up to interview Terry there, and it was just like, oh, like I get to interview Terry Daniluk, and it just and that one is kind of one of them that's gonna haunt me forever. But actually, going back to that one where Taylor,
we keep bringing it up. You can let it go. We just keep bringing it up.
I mean, hey, you know what? You guys can bring it up. I don't mind. It's fine.
Our worst brands to be associated with. I'm a big Pandas fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was also the day that I found out that only the Bears are golden. The Pandas aren't golden. It's just they're just the straight Pandas. But going back to that national final where Taylor Arnett is a semifinal where Taylor Arnett got injured. Yeah, I absolutely do think that if he doesn't get injured there, that it's a different story altogether for your team. But you know,
yeah, like it could have still been the same result. That Trinity team was incredibly strong, but I mean, that was a pretty big presence for us. Taylor, I mean, he was more physical than Aaron Chambers coming in, and Taylor, just that arm was insane. But I remember looking down the bench and I don't know how well you know Aaron Chambers, but Aaron is Mr. Preparation. Mm-hmm. And you know, he wasn't Taylor Arnett at that time, but he was as max as Aaron could possibly be. So when we called upon him, he was ready because he had just been kind of born for that kind of moment, like where he was always ready. So I thought he came in and really did a good job for us, even though we lost such a big presence.
Oh, I 100% agree. I definitely think that, and I remember I was doing the broadcast with Jared Brown, and we talked about how well Aaron Chambers played. However, he wasn't Taylor Arnett. And it wasn't the fact that physically he wasn't Taylor Arnett, is that Arnett and Brett Walsh had been playing together for so long and had known each other so well that Walsh could just find Arnett in any type of situation. You know, if the pass was off the net, like if it wasn't a perfect pass or you guys were running out of system, Walsh could still find Arnett, and it's really what helped. Because especially with that Golden Bears team, you had Riley Barnes, Kevin Proudfoot was another guy. Who was another?
Not on that year, Kevin.
No, you're right.
Kevin took off. So we had Nikifor on the right, and then Riley and Alex McMullen on the left.
Okay, yeah, still. So you had Nikifor, who had just finished leading the junior national team, and Nikifor and McMullen, but none of them was like your go-to guy. They were all very solid, and they were all very, very good options, but Arnett really opened up that offense. But what I'm still upset about to this day is that we've never had the McMaster versus Alberta showdown that I wanted. And that you know what, like that was another one. Like McMaster fell in the semifinals in Calgary back in 2014, the same year that I called you guys the Golden Pandas, and that was another one that I wanted. Is I wanted McMaster versus Alberta. Like I wanted to see that go down because you guys played similar types of ball, and I thought it would have been a great final, and I've still been robbed of seeing that.
Yeah, but then we got the May versus May show, which was...
We did. We did get the May versus May
two
show.
Two gritty brothers going at each other. That was pretty fun.
Reed came out on top on that one.
Yeah.
That was a fun. Do you look back and, like, do you have a favorite, like, national championship or anything like that, or do they all kind of just blend into one? Because, like, there's been, literally, like, when's the last time that Alberta didn't go to nationals? I can't remember it.
I don't think I have a favorite. I think that they're all so different. Um, I, I I wish we, the 18-19 one where we went on the VRS. That one was kind of bittersweet. Like I don't. Yeah, we got there, but it
No,
was weird.
not the way you wanted to.
Yeah. That I'm looking at a picture right now. I'm not going to show it to you because it's really private to the inner circle of our team, but it's the 1920, like before the pandemic got canceled, or before nationals got canceled because of the pandemic. And the night before, we just had one of the most incredible practices we had all year, and we didn't have a very good conference final against Trinity. But that practice is like, man, we're ready. We're ready to like play U of T, and if we get through them, whoever we play next, like this team is ready. And it was just electric. One of those practices where it's like, man, I'm glad this is happening at this point of the season. 3 hours later, nationals was canceled, and it was that. I think like, and then years before that, we have these two back-to-back phenomenal national finals where Kevin Proudfoot just becomes this insane right side. I think there's so many moments that I could call favorite moments. Kevin had an incredible national finals. It was like Brett Walsh that created him for him, I think. And then guys like Taylor Arnett and Johnny Goranson. But I don't think I'm just rambling now because I'm just reliving all of them in my head. Yeah. I don't think I could pick one.
I have a vivid memory of watching Brett Walsh chasing down a ball like at the sideline in 4, or like 4-5 at the tee, and back bump setting a C ball to Kevin Proudfoot, and just no one was expecting him to do that, and Proudfoot just crushing it down the line. That was those are some pretty special rosters that you were a part of.
Yeah, Brett did a really good job with those teams because those teams, the offense was really based on balance and some pipe stuff that we were trying to offset in terms of our court width. And you look on paper, it's kind of like Kevin would be maybe the last guy that's getting volume or that you'd expect to be the killer. And Brett used that. Like he created rhythm for Kevin and created, this guy that maybe teams were hoping that they wouldn't have to worry about. Mm-hmm. And then lo and behold, he's had really good finals. In the year we won in Calgary, the Canada West final, or maybe this is no, I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was the Canada West final. Kevin got a bloody nose from Brad Gunter.
Oh yeah.
Gunter?
Yeah, at TRU.
Yeah, and he had to be removed from the game, and we were like down in that match. And then he got subbed back in, blocked Gunter while he was in row 2, and then went back and got like 2 aces, and then we just won out the whole year from that moment in Canada West, because we went 3-0, 3-0, 3-0, or 3-0, 3-1, 3-0 in the 2014 run. And it was almost like when Kevin got that bloody nose and came back out, he just made a statement and said, okay, let's do this now. Before that, it was kind of like a back and forth. And that moment, that season, I remember being one of my favorite moments. My other one was we were actually out of rotation in a really key moment during the semifinal, the national semifinal, because going back to Taylor Arnett, we would sub him in for Jay Olmsted to block. Mm-hmm. And he didn't switch in his front row order. So he was way out of rotation. But when you look at how referees work, the R1 is looking at the server, toes and stuff like that. The R2 is looking at the receive team for rotation. No one's looking at the 3 blockers. Yeah. So you can see how he missed it. Taylor ended up blocking the Laval right side for a pretty critical point.
Wow, that's it's crazy how you can bring like those memories kind of pop back into your head. Now, right now, Brett Walsh is setting with the men's national team. How much have you seen him improve? Like I've found that like from the last time I saw him with the national team to what he's been doing kind of recently at VNL, like he might be the guy heading into Tokyo.
Yeah, he's improved a lot. I mean, it's almost like he's become the version internationally that he was nationally. Now I think he's still knowing Brett, and he's got such a strong growth mindset that I think he's going to keep doing that. And he has changed his contact a little, and I think in order to be at the as high as he can, international level. And so like it's interesting to see those kind of technical changes. And like when I follow up with Brett and ask him about this or that, like the kind of things he's working on are really cool. What I think of is like when I watched him in VNL, so like the last VNL, which would have been 2019. I thought he worked his way into a really good rhythm, but at the start, like you could tell he was inexperienced and wasn't doing his normal thing, because he was doing like, when Brett came to us, it was a lot about, we had a 50-50 and 80-20, we called it. And like when he came to us, he set 50-50, which meant he was making bold decisions 50% of the time and making tactical decisions 50% of the time. And those bold decisions weren't necessarily tactical decisions. He was just making flashy young sets. And we needed to change that into 80% tactically strong decisions, and then 20% like these athletic, bold, long back sets or crazy forces. And that's usually what you want out of a young setter, someone who's trying to be really bold. And then you kind of groom them into understanding decision-making. And that was the process with Brett. By the end, he was doing so well that he was doing stuff that, you know, he was coming up with on his own. It was really tactically driven. When he started VNL, it was kind of like the opposite. Like he was super conservative. Like when in 2019, it was like, this is an opposite side of Brett, but I think it's because maybe the moment was really big or he was nervous. And then as he played more games, he's flipping that one off his shoulder, or he's dropping and reversing and creating like different looks, different angles. And it's like, oh, that's the Brett that we know that can be, make some bold sets or make some Checo type reverses and stuff like that. And I think it's been cool to watch him find that 80-20 level at the international level, because I think he came into VNL like that this year, where 2019 he was just kind of fresh on the scene.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's been he's been doing some incredible things so far, but also like leading the team and leading the hitters. And I mean, Siobhan Vernon Evans scored more points in the last game against Brazil than he did all season in Perugia. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons there. That
was a weird year for Perugia.
Yeah, I mean, that's what kind of happens when you have Tragica setting. Actually, wasn't it you that posted?
I've never. That's mean.
I mean, so I don't know, but for Volleyball Source, we have a Discord account. I don't know if you know what Discord is, but it's basically like a chat forum. So I have a chat forum for Volleyball Source. Actually, if you want, I can send you the link and you can join it, because it's just open. But there was a lot of Tragica hate this year on our Discord account, and I mean, we've got guys who are in Italy who are like long-term fans of Lube or Modena or stuff like that, so they love to hate on anything Perugia anyways, and they just hated on Dragon Treviza all year long. But was it you who posted, was it a picture from Fishu Games where I distinctly remember, I'm pretty sure it's you and Dodds who are at the net having maybe a bit of a rough up with the Italian team?
Yeah, I mean, before we get into that, I don't think you should really be hating on someone you don't really know. Oh. I get the like fun part of it, but like Riley played with Travica and he said he was a pretty good guy. And I mean,
I will just have you know that this isn't necessarily me. We've got a good group of people, and it's group think sometimes, but hey, you do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah, the Fishu Games thing was that was an interesting moment, because we had a horrible prep run in the Fishu Games. This was 2007, and we played in this really not a very high quality tournament right before, and we did really poorly in it. And then we went to Fishu, and we ended up hitting our stride and coming second in the whole thing, which was really good for us. We hit playoffs and we played Germany in this epic 5-set match where that whole tournament, we had a starting right side by the name of Chris Brand.
Okay.
And a backup right side by the name of Gavin Schmidt. And So
Who's
Gavin
he?
came in almost every match. And that was like obviously hard on Chris Brand because Chris Brand was pretty good at the time and playing in some high level teams. Chris and I played together in Germany, and he played for Roeselare and some other good teams. But Gavin would come in and just really take over. Not to the level where we know him from the A team, but from a level where it's like, wow, this guy's gonna be really good, and especially serving. And so he did that against Germany, and then same thing against Italy. He came in, but on that team, like Mark Dodds was like our big attacker, and we were playing Italy. We lost the first set, and we were kind of, battling for ground in the second set, and Dodds hit this pipe, and just kind of as he does, like cheered towards the other side, and the Italians didn't like that. And that caused this whole like scene at the net. And that Fishu team and the Fishu team prior, which had a lot of the same guys, had a bit of a fighter mentality reputation. And so that just really worked for us because that Italian team at the time didn't really like our personality. So I was just talking with one of my assistant coaches about this, how I think that like volleyball wise, I'm not a big fan of the standard on court presence. Like I think that volleyball players tend to whine a lot, and I'm not. I like our hockey mentality in Canada, where it's a little more like, hey, we can get gritty, we can get in each other's faces. I also think that the structure of rules in volleyball doesn't really allow us to do the hockey thing. But anyways, I think that team had that mentality, and that worked for us because the Italian team was rattled, where we were like, okay, let's pounce, and that's kind of what happened. And there was, some stuff with Travica at the net, but it wasn't just him. It was the rest of the Italian guys. It wasn't just Dodds. It was all of us. And but Travica was like their best player, so he was phenomenal at that age. Like I remember seeing him, I was like, damn, why don't I set like this? Because he was world class at that time. And that was the fun match, and we were lucky because as we started to move through the tournament, we got attention. So we got a lot of photography in that tournament, and like that match alone, there's like 40 photos of it, and so we got a lot of documentation and like great shots. Ryan Marsden just sent me a couple pics from that tournament the other day. And that there was one of that stuff when it went down, but that was fun. And that's the kind of thing that I was saying before. Like I like that. Like when that happened, I like that. But then off the court, like, we didn't get to do it with the Italian team, but off the court, I would love to have a beer with the guys after, and maybe Travica and I could chat after and shake hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember kind of. It was leading up to 2016. I was talking to Adam Simak, and he talked about the team having a switch where they just took on this like fourth line grinders mentality. And this is talking about the national team. And I think that that's perfectly apt for describing Canadian volleyball, because at the end of the day, as much as like there's guys like Gavin, and as much we've got way more skill guys on the team than maybe we had in the past, I think that at the end of the day, we're not going to maybe have the skill guys that Brazil or Italy or these other countries that might have. And that I think that adopting that mentality of these fourth line grinders, more of a hockey mentality, which is of course well known to us Canadians, is something that benefits Canadian volleyball very, very well. And I like seeing us play with a bit of that edge and a bit of almost of a chip on our shoulder to be able to go and have to prove ourselves every single time.
Yeah, I agree. Like that team, I think of the personalities that were on that team that maybe weren't the guys whose names still echo, like a Gavin Schmidt, but like that team, like an Adam Simak, a Tone Van Lankfeld, Dustin Schneider,
epic grinder,
Dan, those guys were grinders and they were fighters and guys that liked to battle. Or, and Nicholas Cundy, like he had stuff when Nicholas Cundy played. His pet peeve was getting along with the other side. Like you see stuff happening in a match now and guys are giving each other 5, one team to the other team. Sure, great sportsmanship. Sure. But he didn't care about that. He wanted to, no, I'm beating you right now, and I'm going to do everything in my power to do that, including my demeanor. And you can make an argument for what you said. Like, yeah, maybe there's other teams that have a certain skill set. I mean, Canada's becoming quite skilled, but is that a niche to have more of a fighter mentality? I don't know if it is. That's a very inner circle cultural thing, but being around with the team and like all those guys I mentioned just now, I played with, and knowing those guys like the Tone, Dustin, Gav, Shemats, Kaminsky, all those guys, knowing those guys like that fit for that culture, and I think that can be an advantage.
100%. And I mean, I think that, as I said before, I really think that you guys established that culture and that identity almost of Canadian volleyball, and I think it's permeated all throughout now. You know, I think that that's the way we see our guys play the game and approach the game, and that's something that I'm very thankful for, and I love watching.
Yeah, there are some key players like those guys I mentioned that, you know, were around for a long time, and then but some of them, you know, the older generation influenced them. Like if you go back even, like I know that there is this clear cut transition in coaching staff between Stelio and Glenn, and Glenn's done a fantastic job and got the team to the Olympics and everything. But there was player transfer that with them comes culture. So we go even further back to the conversation, like Murray Grappentine, you talk about all the guys who just did, he was, you know, head honcho of that. And pushing guys and being hard on guys and cutthroat and like trash talking, and there was a lot of guys like that. Now I wasn't around those guys as much, but Murray was a guy that stood out to me. So those guys, when they moved on, and then the younger guys, like myself at the time that was young, or like Dustin who was young, or Shemats who was young, Fred who was young, like everyone kind of sees that. And that's what Murray's doing. That's what Paul Dern's doing. That's what Pascal Cardinal's doing. Like I think that kind of that has been a big part of the Canadian volleyball core, like carrying over the generations, or at least it was from when I played. Like I said, where they're at now, I can't speak to the inner circle because I've been gone for so long.
I mean, I can't really speak to it either, but I see that permeating through the way that they play, and I love it. You know, I love that Canadian volleyball has an identity, and I love that it's a bit more, maybe a little bit more rougher around the edges than some people view volleyball. And maybe that's why, you know, we've seen such a growth in the sport in the past decade. Yeah. Well, Brock, to be honest, we went quite a bit longer than I thought we would. You got me kind of pining for the old days with some great stories. I'm going to have you on the show again, because I feel like I've only just touched in, you know, just dipped a toe into the water for some of your stories. But really appreciate you coming and taking the time to chat with me today. I know that you've always got things on the go, and you're always getting ready for the next season and working with the junior or youth national team and all of that. So can't thank you enough for coming and chat with me today.
Anytime, man. It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun chatting volleyball with you. I know we could probably do this for hours. So
definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to come back whenever you want me.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe sometime in September, once we're getting ready for the U Sports season and we know a little bit more about what's been going on, and you can fill us in on some of your creative ways of how you're going to be keeping the Golden Bears on top. You guys are going to be? I mean, I think that you guys are going to be gunning for another, you know, getting back on that national championship podium. Is that fair to assume?
I think that we set the goal and expectation that is the pace every year. And if Terry and I see that isn't the pace, then recruiting strategies would change. But I think that is the desire of the group, and the expectation. Whether that comes to fruition is how well our guys invest in the off season and how they come into the preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like Duke basketball in the NCAA. You don't go to Alberta volleyball if you just want to be mediocre.
Yeah. That's what I hope. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time, and best of luck with the youth national team this summer. Hopefully you can instill some of that grinder mentality on those young kids, and we'll talk